Emeka thought he had designed the perfect life. A pristine mansion, a high-powered career, and finally, a wife with no voice. He traveled deep into the village to find a blank slate, a woman he could program like a machine to fit into his cold marble world. He scrubbed away
Guy,
the
I'm
history
marrying a
and
virgin
painted
from
over
the
her
village.
identity,
Not
convinced he was sculpting a
all these
masterpiece
Lagos
of
girls
submission.
with fake life.
But in his obsession with control, he forgot that silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's preparation. As he tightened his grip, turning his home into a golden prison, he missed the warning signs. He thought he was the master of the house, but he was about to learn a terrifying lesson. When you treat a human being like an object, you don't get loyalty. You get a rebellion that burns quietly until it destroys everything you love. What happens when the perfect project decides to rewrite the script? This isn't just a drama. It's a psychological battle between a man who thought he could buy a soul and a woman who had to lose everything to find herself. The ending will leave you staring at the screen, questioning the true cost of pride. Welcome to Folktale Bestie. We are so excited to share this emotional journey with you. Please, if you enjoy our storytelling, do us a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. It really helps us grow and bring you more powerful content. Also, we love meeting our global family, so tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from today? Now, let's get into the story. Emeka drove his big black SUV down the rough road that led to Umuorji village. The red dust from the ground rose up and covered the tires of his expensive car. He rolled up his windows tight to keep the cool air from his air conditioner inside. Outside, it was very hot, but inside his car, it was cool and smelled like expensive perfume. Emeka was a big man in Lagos. He lived in Lekki, in a house painted white with a swimming pool. He was an architect. He drew plans for big buildings. He had money, plenty of it. But Emeka was not happy with women. He was tired of the girls in Lagos. They are too stubborn, Emeka always told his friends. You tell a Lagos woman to sit down, she will ask you why. You tell her to cook, she will tell you to order food. I don't want stress. Emeka wanted a wife who would listen to him. He wanted a woman who would say, yes, sir, and no, sir. He wanted respect. That was why he came all the way to this village in the east. He was looking for a raw material. He was looking for a blank slate. He arrived at the compound of a man named Papa Adanna. It was a simple village house. The walls were made of cement that was not painted, and the roof was made of rusty zinc sheets. Chickens were running around the yard. Emeka parked his big car under a mango tree. He stepped out. He was wearing a white senator suit that was very starched. His shoes were shiny and black. He looked like a king visiting a poor man. Papa Adanna came out to meet him. He was an old man with gray hair. He wore a wrapper and an old singlet. He smiled when he saw Emeka. Welcome, my son, Papa Adanna said. He shook Emeka's hand with 2 hands to show respect. Good afternoon, Papa, Emeka said. They sat down on plastic chairs in front of the house. A young boy brought cola nuts on a saucer. Papa Adanna prayed over the cola. He thanked God for bringing Emeka safely. They broke the cola and ate. Emeka chewed quickly. He was in a hurry. He wanted to finish this business and go back to the city. Papa, like I told you on the phone, Emeka started. I am ready to marry, but I don't want a woman who knows too much. I want a quiet girl, a girl I can train. Papa Adanna nodded his head. I understand. My daughter Adanna is very quiet. She has finished secondary school, but she did not go to university. She has been here with me in the village. She helps me in the farm. She cooks very well. Does she have a boyfriend? Emeka asked. No, Papa Adanna waved his hand. She is a good girl. She does not follow boys around. Call her, Emeka said. Papa Adanna shouted towards the back of the house. Adanna, come here. After a minute, a young girl walked out. This was Adanna. Emeka looked at her closely. She was young, maybe 22 years old. She was wearing a faded blue wrapper tied around her chest. Her shoulders were bare. Her skin was dark and smooth, but she had no makeup on. Her hair was threaded with black rubber thread, standing up in spikes. It was a very old style. She was not wearing shoes. Her feet were dusty from the sand. Adanna saw the stranger and looked down. She was shy. She knelt down on the sand to greet him. Good afternoon, sir, she said softly. Emeka liked that. She knelt down. No Lagos girl would kneel down on the sand for him. Stand up, Emeka said. She stood up but kept her eyes on the ground. She played with her fingers nervously. What is your name? Emeka asked. Adanna, sir. Do you know who I am? No, sir. I am Emeka. I live in Lagos. Do you like Lagos? I have never been to Lagos, sir, she answered. Emeka smiled. It was perfect. She knew nothing. She had seen nothing. He could mold her. He could shape her like clay. You can go, Emeka told her. Adanna turned and ran back into the house. Emeka turned to Papa Adanna. I like her. I will pay the bride price today. Papa Adanna was surprised. Today? But we have not called the kinsman. I don't have time for long ceremony, Emeka said. He reached into his bag and brought out a thick envelope. It was full of cash. This is enough for everything. The list, the drinks, everything. Take it. Papa Adanna took the envelope. He opened it and saw the bundles of Naira notes. His eyes went wide. It was more money than he had seen in 10 years. Thank you, my son. Thank you, the old man said. I will come back in 2 weeks to pick her up, Emeka said, standing up. Tell her to get ready. She is not taking anything from this village. I will buy her everything new in Lagos. Emeka got back into his car. He reversed and drove out of the dusty compound. As he hit the main road, he felt like a winner. He picked up his phone and called his best friend, Tund. Tund, I have done it, Emeka said loudly. You have found a wife? Tund asked on the phone. Yes. She is a proper village girl. She was eating cola nut when I saw her. She has no exposure. She is a blank slate, Tund. Are you sure you can handle a village girl? Tund laughed. They can be very local. That is the point, Emeka said. I will brush her up. I will teach her how to walk, how to talk, and how to dress. I will turn her into the perfect wife. She will fear me and she will respect me. I am the artist, Tund, and she is my canvas. Emeka drove faster, blasting music in his car. He did not know that a human being is not a building. You cannot just paint over their history and expect the paint to stay. He thought he had found peace, but he had just started a war he did not understand. 2 weeks later, the black SUV returned to Umuorji, but it did not stay. Within an hour, Adanna was sitting in the front passenger seat, watching her father waving goodbye until he disappeared into the red dust. On her lap, she clutched a large, checkered Gonna-Must-Go bag. It contained everything she owned. A few faded wrappers, 2 pairs of slippers, some chewing sticks, and a bottle of groundnut oil her mother had forced her to pack. The journey to Lagos was long and terrifying. Adanna had never traveled past Onitsha. As they crossed the River Niger Bridge, she held her breath, afraid the water would swallow them. Emeka did not speak to her. He played loud music and made phone calls in a language that sounded like English but was too fast for her to understand. When they finally entered Lagos, it was night. The lights were blinding. Cars moved bumper to bumper, and the noise was like a market that never closed. Adanna pressed her face against the cold glass of the window. Stop looking like a bush girl, Emeka snapped, glancing at her. Sit back. Adanna quickly sat back, her heart beating fast. They arrived in Lekki Phase 1. The streets here were different. They were quiet and paved with smooth stones. The houses were behind tall gates with electric fences that hummed like bees. Emeka drove up to a black gate. He pressed a button on a small remote, and the gate opened on its own. Adanna gasped. She thought it was magic. Emeka parked the car in the garage. Get down, he ordered. Adanna struggled with the door handle before pushing it open. She grabbed her heavy bag. Leave that thing there, Emeka said, looking at the bag with disgust. The houseboy will burn it later. You don't need those rags here. But my clothes, Adanna whispered. I said leave it. Emeka shouted. Adanna dropped the bag. Her hands were shaking. She followed him to the front door. Inside, the house was freezing. The air conditioner was blasting cold air. Adanna shivered. The floor was made of white marble that shone like a mirror. She looked at her feet. Her rubber slippers were brown with village sand. She felt dirty. Take off those slippers, Emeka commanded. You don't walk on my Italian marble with that dirt. Adanna quickly removed her slippers and held them in her hand. She walked barefoot on the cold floor. It felt like walking on ice. The living room was huge. It had gray sofas and a glass table. There were no pictures of family on the wall, only strange paintings of shapes and lines. It was quiet. Too quiet. In the village, even at night, you could hear neighbors talking or crickets chirping. Here, the silence was heavy. Emeka led her to the kitchen. It was like a laboratory. Everything was silver and shiny. Adanna stood in the middle, afraid to touch anything. Her eyes landed on a small machine with a glass front and numbers. Is this the TV? She asked innocently, pointing at it. Emeka groaned and rubbed his face with his hand. God, what have I done? He muttered to himself. He looked at her with anger. No, Adanna. That is a microwave. We use it to warm food. The TV is in the parlor. This is for cooking. He pointed to a tall, silver machine. This is the refrigerator. The AC is the thing on the wall making the room cold. Do not touch the AC. Do not touch the microwave. In fact, do not touch anything until I tell you. Adanna nodded quickly. Yes, sir. And stop calling me sir. I am your husband, not your school teacher. Adanna felt small. She felt like a child who had failed an exam she didn't study for. Her throat was dry from the long journey. She saw a shiny tap over a silver sink. She needed water. She walked to the sink and turned the handle. Water rushed out. She cupped her hands to drink, just like she did at the village stream. Slap! Adanna jumped back. Emeka had swatted her hand away hard. Are you mad? Emeka yelled. His face was twisted in annoyance. What do you think you are doing? Drinking from the tap? Do you want to get cholera? Adanna held her hand. It stung. I was thirsty, she stammered. The water looks clean. We drink bottled water here. Emeka opened the fridge and grabbed a cold bottle of Eva water. He shoved it into her chest. You are not in the bush anymore, Adanna. This is Lekki. We don't behave like animals here. Adanna took the bottle. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She was not crying because of the slap. She was crying because he looked at her like she was a dirty thing he had stepped on. Go upstairs, Emeka said, turning his back on her. Second door to the left. That is your room. Shower and sleep. I have work to do. Adanna climbed the stairs slowly. The house was beautiful, yes. But it was cold. She found the room and entered. It was big and empty. She sat on the bed, holding the cold water bottle. She drank the water, but it had no taste. She missed the sweet water from the earthen pot in her father's house. She missed her sisters laughing as they pounded yam. She missed the sound of her mother singing. Here, in this white mansion, there was only the hum of the AC and the cold marble floor. Emeka thought he had brought her to paradise, but as Adanna lay down on the soft bed, she realized the truth. He had not brought her to a home. He had put her in a beautiful glass cage, and she did not know where the key was. With Adanna safely deposited in the guest room like a piece of luggage, Emeka felt a sense of accomplishment. The project had begun. But before he could fully dedicate himself to remodeling his new acquisition, he had to clear the existing clutter from his life. He took a shower, washing off the dust of the village, and changed into a fresh navy blue suit. He sprayed his Tom Ford cologne liberally. He wasn't dressing up for romance. He was dressing up for a business meeting. A termination meeting. He drove out of his gate, the tires humming on the smooth asphalt of the Lekki-Ikoyi Link Bridge. The city lights reflected on the lagoon, shimmering like scattered diamonds. Emeka didn't look at the beauty. He only checked the traffic. He arrived at the View, a high-end lounge in Victoria Island. The air inside smelled of expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and money. Soft jazz played in the background, the kind of music that was meant to be heard but not listened to. Emeka spotted her immediately. Cynthia. She was sitting in a corner booth, typing furiously on her iPad. She looked stunning. Her weave was a sleek, bone-straight style that framed her face perfectly. She wore a tailored red dress that screamed power. Cynthia was a senior associate at one of the top law firms in Lagos. She was sharp, beautiful, and fiercely independent. She was everything Emeka thought he wanted 3 years ago, and everything he now despised. Emeka, she said without looking up as he approached. You are 30 minutes late. I have a brief to file by morning. Hello, Cynthia, Emeka said, sliding into the leather seat opposite her. He signaled the waiter for a double whiskey. Cynthia finally looked up. Her eyes were tired but intelligent. She put the iPad away. You've been ghosting me for 2 weeks, Emeka. No calls, no texts. And now you summon me here on a Tuesday night. What is going on? Emeka took a sip of his drink. He didn't like to beat around the bush. He checked his diamond-encrusted watch. We are done, Cynthia, he said flatly. The jazz music seemed to stop for a second. Cynthia blinked. She let out a small, confused laugh. Excuse me? I said we are done. The relationship is over. Cynthia stared at him. The waiter placed a Chapman on the table for her, but she didn't touch it. Her composure, usually ironclad from years in the courtroom, began to crack. Just like that. Her voice trembled slightly. 3 years, Emeka. We were talking about marriage last Christmas. What happened? Is it because I missed your birthday dinner for the arbitration hearing? I told you that case was. It is not about the dinner, Cynthia, Emeka cut in, his voice cold and steady. It is about you. It is about who you are. Who I am. She leaned forward, her voice rising just a fraction. I am a successful lawyer. I support you. I challenge you. What is the problem? That is the problem. Emeka slammed his glass down. You challenge me. Every time I speak, you have an opinion. Every time I make a decision, you have a better idea. I come home tired, and instead of peace, I get a debate. I am your partner, Emeka, not your child. Cynthia snapped. I have a brain. I have a voice. You loved that about me when we met. I was wrong, Emeka replied, wiping his mouth with a napkin. I don't need a partner who competes with me. I don't need a woman who earns almost as much as I do and rubs it in my face by buying her own cars. I need a wife, Cynthia. Not a competitor. Cynthia sat back, stunned. She looked at this man she had loved, this man she had defended to her friends when they called him arrogant. She saw him clearly for the first time. So, she whispered, because I refused to quit my job? Because I refused to shrink myself to fit into your small idea of manhood? That is why you are leaving. I have found what I need, Emeka said, his eyes gleaming with that dangerous pride. I went back to the east. I found a girl. She is young. She is fresh. She knows nothing about this Lagos madness. Cynthia's mouth fell open. You went to the village to buy a wife? I went to find a wife I can mold, Emeka corrected her. She is a blank slate. I will teach her how to dress, how to talk, and how to respect a man. She will not argue about law or politics. She will just be my wife. The table was silent. Cynthia looked at him for a long time. The hurt in her eyes slowly turned into something else, pity. She stood up, picking up her iPad and her designer bag. She looked down at him, not with anger, but with the sadness one feels when looking at a broken thing that cannot be fixed. You are a fool, Emeka, she said softly. Emeka scoffed. I am a man who knows what he wants. No, Cynthia shook her head, a sad smile playing on her lips. You are a weak man who is terrified of a strong woman. You don't want a wife, Emeka. You want a fan club. You want a dog that barks only when you say speak. Watch your mouth, Emeka warned, his eyes narrowing. Good luck with your project, Cynthia said, turning to walk away. She paused and looked back one last time. But remember this, Emeka. When you treat a human being like clay, don't be surprised when she hardens and breaks in your hands. You are throwing away a diamond to go and pick up a stone because the stone is easier to carry. She walked out of the lounge, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. Heads turned as she passed, a woman of substance, walking away from a man of ego. Emeka watched her go. He felt a flicker of annoyance at her final words, but he quickly drowned it with the rest of his whiskey. She was just jealous, he told himself. She was bitter because she had lost him. He paid the bill and stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He felt lighter. The clutter was gone. Now he could go back to his mansion, to his silence, and to his blank slate. He had work to do. 2 weeks had passed since Emeka cleared the clutter of his past relationship, but the peace he sought in his mansion remained elusive. The blank slate he had brought from Umaorji was proving difficult to write on. Adanna moved through the house like a ghost, terrified of the marble floors, terrified of the microwave, and most of all, terrified of him. Emeka was growing impatient. He was a man of status, and in Lagos, status needed to be displayed. The annual gala for the Nigerian Institute of Architects was coming up at the Eco Hotel and Suites. It was the biggest night of the year for his industry. He wanted to walk in with his new, young, submissive wife on his arm. He wanted to show his colleagues that while they were struggling with woke feminist wives, he had secured a woman who worshipped the ground he walked on. But looking at Adanna, who was currently sweeping the already clean living room in a faded wrapper, he knew she wasn't ready. Adanna, stop that! Emeka barked from the sofa. She froze, the broom dropping from her hand. Sorry, Emeka. I told you to use the vacuum cleaner. How many times will I explain? He stood up, frustrated. Forget the cleaning. Come upstairs. I have something for you. Adanna followed him to the master bedroom. On the bed lay several shopping bags from high-end boutiques in Lekki. Emeka emptied them out. There were boxes of expensive foundation, powders, red lipsticks, eyeshadow palettes, and a long, silky bone-straight wig that cost more than her father's entire farm. Tonight is a big night, Emeka said, pointing at the pile. I am taking you out. I want you to look like a city woman, not a village girl. Adanna touched the wig. It felt like water. Thank you, Emeka. Don't just thank me. Fix yourself, he commanded, checking his watch. I have a meeting. When I come back in 2 hours, I want to see a transformation. Use these things. Make your face fine. Wear the dress in the bag. Do not disappoint me. He left the room, leaving Adanna alone with the strange tools of beauty. Adanna was confused. She had never used these things before. In Omoorji, beauty was simple: camwood powder on the skin, uli patterns drawn for festivals, and palm oil to make the skin glow. She looked at the tubes of foundation. She didn't know about blending or contouring. She didn't know that less is more. She wanted to please him. She wanted him to look at her and smile, not frown. So she did what she knew. She applied the foundation thick, like clay paint, covering every inch of her skin until it looked like a mask. She remembered how the dancers in the village painted their faces for the New Yam festival, bold, bright, and visible from a distance. She drew her eyebrows thick and black with the eye pencil, arching them high onto her forehead. She took the blue eyeshadow and painted large circles around her eyes. She took the bright red lipstick and applied it generously, extending it past her lip line to make her mouth look bigger. Finally, she struggled into the tight sequin dress and jammed the wig onto her head. It sat crookedly, sliding slightly to the left. She looked in the mirror. The colors were bright. She looked like the women in the village square during a celebration. She smiled, thinking she had done well. 2 hours later, Emeka returned. He was dressed in a black tuxedo, looking sharp and regal. "Adanna," he called out from the bottom of the stairs. "Are you ready?" "Yes, Emeka," she replied, her voice filled with a rare excitement. She walked out of the room and began to descend the grand staircase. She imagined she was a queen. Emeka looked up. His smile vanished. His eyes widened in horror. His jaw actually dropped. Adanna reached the bottom step and curtsied. "How do I look?" Emeka stared at her for a full 5 seconds, unable to speak. The thick, unblended foundation was 3 shades too light. The eyebrows looked like angry charcoal marks. The blue eyeshadow and red lipstick clashed violently. With the crooked wig, she didn't look like a sophisticated Lagos wife. She looked like a caricature. "Jesus of Nazareth!" Emeka yelled, stepping back as if he had seen a ghost. "What is this?" Adanna's smile faltered. The makeup. You said I should fix myself." "I said look like a human being, not a masquerade." Emeka screamed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Look at yourself. Mamu, that is what you look like. A village masquerade." Adanna flinched. "But I tried." "You tried what?" "To disgrace me." Emeka threw his hands in the air, pacing around the living room. "Imagine me walking into Eco Hotel with you looking like this. My friends will laugh me to scorn. They will think I picked a mad woman from under the bridge." "I am sorry," Adanna whispered, tears gathering in her painted eyes. "Sorry for yourself." Emeka snapped. "Go upstairs. Go and wash that rubbish off your face. Right now. Scrub it off." Are we not going again?" she asked, a tear cutting a track through the thick powder. "Go with you? Like this?" Emeka laughed a cruel, bitter laugh. "I cannot take you anywhere. You are an embarrassment. I will go alone." He turned and stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. Adanna stood there in the silence, the beautiful dress feeling tight and suffocating. She turned and ran back upstairs to the bathroom. She stood before the mirror and saw what he saw. She didn't see the effort, she saw the failure. She turned on the tap and splashed water on her face. She grabbed a rough towel and scrubbed. She scrubbed the expensive foundation, the blue eyeshadow, the red lipstick. She scrubbed hard, punishing her skin for being wrong. The makeup mixed with her tears, running down the sink in a swirl of brown, blue, and red. She scrubbed until her face was clean, but she didn't stop there. She kept scrubbing until her skin was red and raw, until it stung. She wanted to scrub away the village. She wanted to scrub away the girl who didn't know how to use a microwave or wear a wig. She sat on the cold bathroom floor, her face burning, and cried. She wasn't ugly. She knew she wasn't ugly. In her village, men wrote poems about her dark skin. But in this house, under Emeka's gaze, she was nothing but a mistake that couldn't be fixed. The silence in the white mansion was not peaceful. It was aggressive. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the ears and amplified the sound of one's own heartbeat. For Adanna, the days bled into one another, indistinguishable and gray. Emeka had become a ghost in his own home. He left before the sun fully rose, his cologne lingering in the hallway as the only proof he had been there, and returned long after the news at 10 had finished, usually smelling of whiskey and exhaustion. Adanna was strictly forbidden from the kitchen. Emeka claimed her cooking was too oily and pungent for his modern nose. So a chef came in 3 times a week. The cleaners came on Mondays and Thursdays. Adanna had absolutely nothing to do. She would pace the length of the living room, counting the marble tiles. She would sit by the window and watch the gardeners trim the hedges, envying them because they could feel the sun on their skin and dirt on their hands. She was a queen in a castle, but she was starving for human connection. Her only escape lay at the end of the long, paved driveway. It started innocently. One afternoon, bored out of her mind, Adanna walked to the gate to collect a delivery because the intercom system confused her. There, she met Musa. Musa was the day security guard. He was a lanky man from Kano with a face that seemed permanently etched with a grin. He sat in the small, cramped gatehouse, which smelled faintly of roasted yam and radio static. "Good afternoon, madam." Musa had greeted her that first day, jumping to his feet and adjusting his beret. "Oga never come back." "I know," Adanna had replied, lingering. She didn't want to go back to the cold house. "Musa, what are you listening to?" "Ah, madam, na radio drama." "Dogo and the Thief," Musa laughed, tuning the small transistor radio. That brief exchange was the spark of life Adanna needed. The gatehouse became her sanctuary. While Emeka thought she was napping or learning to be civilized upstairs, Adanna would slip out the back door, walk through the garden, and sit on an overturned keg of vegetable oil inside Musa's gatehouse. They were an unlikely pair, the master's wife and the gatekeeper. But in that small box, class did not exist. There was only humanity. Musa listened to her. He didn't correct her English. He didn't tell her to stop slouching. He didn't look at her like she was a project to be fixed. He looked at her like a person. "Madam, this Lagos life is hard-o," Musa said one evening, chewing on a stick of sugar cane. "But we thank Allah for life." "In my village," Adanna said, her eyes lighting up as she spoke of home, "we would gather under the Udara tree when the moon is out. We would tell stories until sleep took us. Here there is no moon. Only streetlights. Lagos no get time for moon," Musa chuckled. "Everybody is running. Running to find money. Running to hide money." They laughed. It was a loud, belly-shaking laugh that started deep in the chest and exploded outward. It was the kind of laugh Adanna hadn't laughed in months. It echoed off the high walls of the compound, a sound of rebellion against the sterile silence of the mansion. 2 weeks passed like this. Adanna began to look forward to the evenings. She would even sneak pieces of chicken from the fridge. Chicken she wasn't allowed to cook, and wrap them in foil for Musa. One particularly breezy evening, the radio station began playing a classic highlife song by Oliver de Coke. The guitar riffs were infectious, sweet, and rhythmic. The music drifted through the air, mixing with the scent of the queen of the night flowers in the garden. "Ah, this is music," Musa exclaimed, drumming his hands on his knees. Adanna felt the rhythm in her blood. Without thinking, she stood up. Her feet, usually heavy with the sadness of the house, became light. She began to move. She moved her waist, her hands, her shoulders. She danced the way she used to dance in the village square, free and unashamed. Musa clapped along, cheering her on. "Go on, madam. Oya! Shake body." Adanna threw her head back and laughed, spinning around in the driveway, the dust rising slightly around her feet. For a moment, she wasn't Emeka's failed project. She was Adanna. She was alive. She was so lost in the joy of the moment that she didn't hear the hum of the engine. She didn't see the automatic gate slide open. Suddenly, blinding white LED headlights cut through the darkness, freezing her in place like a deer on the highway. The music seemed to die instantly. Emeka's black G-Wagon rolled into the compound and came to a stop just a few feet away from her. The engine purred like a predator. Adanna stopped dancing. Her chest was heaving from exertion, but her blood ran cold. Musa immediately jumped to attention, stiff as a board, fear written all over his face. The driver's door opened. Emeka stepped out. He was wearing a sharp gray suit, his tie loosened slightly. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply stood there, looking from Musa to Adanna. His expression was not one of jealousy. A man gets jealous when he fears he might lose something valuable to a rival. Emeka did not see Musa as a rival. He saw him as furniture. No, what was on Emeka's face was pure, unadulterated disgust. It was the look one gives a dog that has rolled in the mud. He walked slowly towards Adanna. "Emeka, I." Adanna started, her voice trembling. "Quiet," he hissed. The word was soft but sharp as a razor. He looked at Musa. You. You are paid to open the gate and watch the fence. Not to turn my compound into a village shrine. If I see this again, you are gone. Do you hear me? Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, Musa stammered, looking at the ground. Emeka turned his cold gaze to Adanna. He looked her up and down, noting the sweat on her brow and the dust on her feet. And you, he said, his voice dripping with venom. Look at you, dancing with the help, laughing like a market woman in the street. I was just lonely, Emeka, she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. I have no one to talk to. You are the madam of this house. Emeka barked, his control slipping for a second. You are Mrs. Okonkwo. Do you know how much I spent to bring you here? Do you know who I am? He stepped closer, towering over her. Why do you insist on embarrassing me? Why do you insist on dragging yourself in the mud? You are associating with a gateman? You are lowering my value, Adanna. You are making me look cheap. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight and painful. Get inside. Now. He didn't wait for her to move. He dragged her towards the front door. Adanna stumbled, trying to keep up with his angry strides. She looked back once at the gatehouse. Musa was standing in the dark, head bowed, the radio turned off. The heavy front door slammed shut behind them, sealing out the night air, the music, and the only friend she had. The silence of the house rushed back in to swallow her whole, colder and heavier than before. 3 days after the incident with Musa at the gatehouse, the atmosphere in the Okonkwo mansion was still as tight as a drum. Emeka had not spoken a single soft word to Adanna. He walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture that he regretted buying. However, on Friday evening, Emeka came home early. He was in a different mood. It was not a happy mood, but a determined one. He had decided that keeping Adanna locked up was not working. He needed to test her. He needed to see if his scolding had reset her brain. He wanted to see if she could function in the real world. His world. Go and dress up, Emeka said, standing in the living room while loosening his tie. Wear that blue dress I bought last week. Not the shiny one. The simple one. We are going out for dinner. Adanna looked up from the floor where she was sitting. Hope rose in her chest. Maybe he had forgiven her. Maybe this was a peace offering. Yes, Emeka, she said quickly, running upstairs. She bathed and dressed carefully. She applied the powder lightly, afraid to make another mistake. She brushed her hair until it shone. When she came downstairs, Emeka looked her over. He nodded once. It was not a compliment, but it was approval. Listen to me, Emeka said as they walked to the car. Where we are going is a place for big men. Governors eat there. CEOs eat there. Do not talk unless someone asks you a question. Do not laugh loudly. Just sit there and look beautiful. Do you understand? Yes, Emeka. They drove to Ikoyi. The restaurant was called the Golden Dragon. It was an upscale Chinese restaurant behind a high fence. The building looked like a temple. Red lanterns hung from the roof, glowing softly in the night. A waiter in a black uniform opened the door for them. The air inside smelled of ginger, soy sauce, and expensive perfume. It was very quiet. People were speaking in whispers. The only sound was the clinking of porcelain and the soft jazz music playing in the background. Adanna felt her heart shrinking. She felt too big and too clumsy for this delicate place. The waiter led them to a table in the center of the room. Emeka walked with his chest out, shaking hands with 2 men at another table. Adanna followed, keeping her head down. They sat. The table was set with white plates, small cups, and napkins folded like swans. Adanna looked for a spoon. There was no spoon. There was no fork. There were only 2 wooden sticks resting on a small ceramic holder. I will order, Emeka told the waiter, ignoring the menu. Give us the special fried rice, the shredded beef in chili sauce, and prawns. Excellent choice, sir. The waiter bowed and left. Adanna sat with her hands in her lap. She was hungry. Very hungry. She had not eaten since breakfast because she was afraid to go to the kitchen while Emeka was angry. Her stomach rumbled quietly. Soon the food arrived. It came in beautiful ceramic bowls. The steam rose up, smelling delicious. The waiter also placed a small white bowl containing warm water and a slice of lemon in front of Adanna. Emeka picked up his wooden sticks, chopsticks, and began to eat with practiced ease. He picked up pieces of beef and put them in his mouth. Adanna watched him. She picked up her own sticks. They felt slippery. She tried to use them to pick up the rice, but her fingers could not make them work. The sticks crossed each other. The rice fell back into the plate. She tried again. The stick slipped and hit the plate with a loud clack. Emeka stopped eating. He glared at her. His eyes said, "Don't embarrass me." Adanna put the sticks down. Her hands were shaking. She was starving, and the food was right there. She looked at the small bowl of warm water with lemon. In her village, when food is served, water is brought to wash hands. It was the tradition. It was the clean thing to do. It must be for washing hands, she thought, because there is no spoon. Adanna dipped her hands into the finger bowl. She squeezed the lemon and washed her fingers. Then, with confidence, she reached into the bowl of fried rice. She gathered a handful of rice, squeezed it slightly like she was eating fufu or gari, and lifted it to her mouth. Grains of rice fell from her hand onto the white tablecloth, but she managed to put the rest in her mouth. It tasted good. She reached in for a second handful. Suddenly, the restaurant went deadly silent. At the next table, a woman gasped. A waiter stopped mid-step. Every eye in the room turned to the center table, where the beautiful young lady was eating Chinese fried rice with her bare hands, oil dripping slightly onto her wrist. Emeka looked up. He saw the rice on her hand. He saw the rice on the table. He saw the people staring. His face turned a deep, dark shade of purple. The vein in his forehead bulged. Adanna! The hiss was low, but it carried the weight of a thunderclap. He reached across and grabbed her wrist. His grip was hard, digging into her skin. Adanna dropped the rice. It scattered all over her dress. What do you think you are doing? Emeka's voice shook with suppressed rage. Adanna looked at him, terrified. Emeka! You are eating like an animal, he whispered harshly, his eyes wild. In a 5-star restaurant. Are you mad? Are you cursed? But there is no spoon, she whispered, her voice trembling, tears instantly filling her eyes. I looked, there is no spoon. Then you ask. Emeka squeezed her wrist harder. You ask the waiter. You don't dip your hand into fried rice like a bush woman. You are disgracing me. I am sorry. I was hungry, she cried softly. Get up, Emeka commanded. But the food. I said get up. Emeka stood up abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He pulled Adanna up by her arm. She stumbled, nearly knocking over the water glass. He threw a bundle of Naira notes onto the table without counting it. He didn't look at the waiters. He didn't look at his friends at the other table. He just wanted to escape. He dragged her towards the exit. Adanna walked fast to keep from falling, her head bowed in shame. She could feel the eyes of everyone on her back. She heard the whispers. Can you imagine? Village girl. Money cannot buy class. They burst out into the cool night air. Emeka shoved her towards the car. Adanna was crying silently now. She was still hungry. The taste of the one mouthful of rice lingered in her mouth, a cruel reminder of the meal she wasn't allowed to finish. She didn't understand. In her father's house, eating with hands was a sign of enjoying the food. Here, it was a crime. She looked at her hands, still oily and smelling of spices, and wondered why her own culture was considered a sin in this city of lights. The drive back from Ikoyi was a funeral procession. The silence inside the Mercedes G-Wagon was heavier than the engine's roar. Emeka drove with one hand on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw set so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. Beside him, Adanna sat pressed against the door, her body vibrating with suppressed sobs. The smell of the fried rice she had spilled on her dress filled the car, a lingering scent of her humiliation. When they pulled into the compound in Lekki, Emeka didn't wait for her. He killed the engine, stormed out of the car, and marched into the house. Adanna followed slowly, her legs feeling like lead. She walked past the living room, past the kitchen where she was forbidden to cook, and climbed the stairs to the guest room, the room that had become her cell. She closed the door and locked it. It was a small act of rebellion, but it was all she had. She stripped off the stained blue dress, letting it fall to the floor like a shed skin. She went into the bathroom and scrubbed her hands again, washing away the phantom grease of the fried rice, washing away the memory of the staring eyes. She put on a simple Ankara wrapper, tying it tightly around her chest. She sat on the bed, staring at the wall, her stomach growling with hunger, but her heart full of a strange, cold resolve. Downstairs, Emeka poured himself a large glass of Hennessy. He downed it in one gulp. The burning liquid did nothing to quench the fire of embarrassment in his chest. He replayed the scene at the restaurant over and over. The waiters. The silence. The eyes of his colleagues. Village girl. He was angry at her, yes. But beneath the anger was a bruised ego. He felt like a man who had bought a Ferrari only to find out it had no engine. He needed to reassert his control. He needed to remind himself, and her, that he was the master of this house. He needed to reclaim his territory. The whiskey warmed his blood. He convinced himself that what they needed was intimacy. Perhaps if he claimed her physically, the bond would form. Perhaps if he showed her who her husband was in the bedroom, she would fall in line in the dining room. It was a twisted logic, born of arrogance and insecurity. He climbed the stairs, his footsteps heavy on the marble. He walked to the guest room door. He turned the handle. It was locked. A surge of rage flared in his chest. Locked? In my own house? He banged on the door with his fist. Bam! 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 Adanna! Open this door, he demanded, his voice slurring slightly. Inside, Adanna jumped. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at the door handle rattling. She knew what he wanted. She had seen that look in men's eyes in the village, the look of a hunter who has cornered his prey. Adanna! I said open up. Emeka shouted again. Don't make me break it down. Adanna took a deep breath. She walked to the door and unlocked it. She opened it just a crack, standing in the gap to block his entry. Emeka pushed against the door, but she held her ground. He looked at her, her bare shoulders, the simple wrapper, the threaded hair. She looked beautiful in a raw, defiant way. Move, Emeka said, stepping forward, reaching out to touch her shoulder. I want to come in. Adanna stepped back, avoiding his hand. No, Emeka. The word hung in the air. Emeka froze. What did you say? I said no, she repeated. Her voice was shaking, trembling like a leaf in the wind, but her eyes were dry and clear. Emeka laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. No. You tell me no? I brought you here, Adanna. I bought the clothes on your back. I feed you. I put a roof over your head. You are my wife. You do not tell me no. He moved to push past her again, expecting her to crumble as she always did, expecting the fear to make her yield. I am not your wife, Adanna said. Emeka stopped dead. He stared at her. Are you mad? Did I not pay your father? Did I not give him a bag of money that can build a house in your village? You paid money, yes, Adanna said, her voice gaining a little more strength, drawing from the deep well of her mother's teachings. You treated me like a goat in the market. You paid and you carried. But you did not do the rights. What rights? Money covers everything. Emeka shouted. No, Emeka. Adanna shook her head slowly. In my village, money is just the beginning. You did not bring the palm wine. You did not kneel before the elders. You did not drink from my cup while I knelt before you to show the world that I have accepted you. We did not do igbenquo. Until you do the rights, until the gods and the elders bless us, I am just a visitor in your house. I am not your wife. Emeka stood there, stunned. The blank slate was speaking back. The empty vessel was filled with a code of honor he didn't understand. My mother raised me with honor, Adanna continued, clutching her wrapper tighter. She told me that a woman who gives herself to a man who has not finished the rites is a concubine, not a wife. I may be a village girl, Emeka. I may not know how to use a fork, but I know who I am, and I will not open my legs for a man who has not opened his heart to my people. Emeka looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes, the stubborn, ancient fire of her ancestors. He realized in that moment that his money had hit a wall. He could buy her body, perhaps, with force, but he could not buy her submission. He had rushed the process, thinking he was smart, thinking he could bypass tradition with cash. Now, tradition was standing in his doorway, barring his entry. He felt a sudden, crushing wave of shame mixed with frustration. He looked at her one last time, seeing not a project, but a person. You will regret this, he muttered, trying to save face. Good night, Emeka, Adanna said softly. She closed the door. He heard the lock click. Emeka stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the wood. He was the master of the house, the architect of skyscrapers, the big man of Lekki. But tonight, he was locked out by a girl who owned nothing but a wrapper and her pride. The lock on the guest room door had changed the dynamic in the house. For the next week, Emeka treated Adanna not as a wife, nor even as a project, but as a ghost. He stopped speaking to her entirely. He would leave money on the dining table for food, strictly for her to buy bread or noodles, as the kitchen ban remained, and walk out without a backward glance. He believed that isolation was the ultimate discipline. He believed that if he starved her of attention long enough, she would come crawling back to his bedroom door, begging to be let in. But silence, when left to ferment, often breeds rebellion. On Saturday morning, Emeka dressed in his crisp white polo and beige chinos. He picked up his golf kit. I am going to the Ikoyi Club, he announced to the empty living room. I will be back in the evening. As soon as the black G-Wagon slid out of the gate, the mansion exhaled. Adanna, who had been watching from the window, felt a surge of restless energy. She couldn't spend another day counting tiles. Earlier that week, with the help of Moose's phone, she had tracked down Nkechi, her childhood best friend from Umuorji. Nkechi had moved to Lagos a year ago and was now selling peppers and tomatoes at the chaotic Mile 12 market. When Adanna called, Nkechi had screamed with joy, promising to visit the moment that your sculpture of a husband was away. Adanna opened the pedestrian gate. Nkechi didn't come alone. She brought the village with her. For other women, loud, boisterous traders from the market, followed her in. They carried heavy coolers, nylon bags, and kegs of palm wine. Adanna, look at you. Nkechi screamed, embracing her. You have added weight, oh. Enjoyment. Adanna laughed, pulling them inside. For the first time, the cold marble floor felt warm under the stampede of feet. They didn't sit on the Italian leather sofas. They found them too soft and uncomfortable. Instead, they spread a large mat on the floor in the center of the living room, just as they would in the village square. They opened the coolers. The smell hit the air immediately. It was the pungent, earthy, aggressive aroma of abacha, African salad mixed with ugba, oil bean, heaps of garden eggs, fried fish, and the unmistakable, nose-punching scent of audrey, fermented castor seeds. To a village girl, it was the smell of home. To a man like Emeka, it was biological warfare. They ate with their hands, licking the red palm oil from their fingers. They drank palm wine from plastic cups. They laughed, loud, raucous laughter that shook the chandelier. They spoke in rapid-fire Igbo, trading stories about the market, about stubborn customers, and about the madness of Lagos. Adanna, so you were just sitting inside this big house doing nothing? One of the women, Chinyere, asked, chewing on a piece of cow skin. Come to the market now. We will give you a stall. My husband won't allow it. Adanna smiled, her mouth full of abacha. He wants me to be polished. Polished fire. Nkechi spat. Is it polish you will eat? A woman must have her own money. Adanna felt alive. She felt blood returning to her veins. The AC hummed, trying to circulate the air, but the smell of the fermented oil was winning. Suddenly, the front door beeped. The laughter died instantly. The women froze, hands midair. Emeka walked in. He had returned early because of a sudden downpour that canceled the golf game. He stepped into the foyer and stopped. His nose twitched. The smell of audrey was thick, heavy, and suffocating. It smelled like a wet market. It smelled like everything he had spent millions to escape. He walked into the living room and saw them. 5 women sitting on his imported marble floor. Red oil stains on the white tiles. Fish bones on a newspaper. The noise. The heat. Emeka dropped his golf bag. The crash was deafening. What is this? He whispered, his voice trembling with a rage so deep it felt cold. The women scrambled to their feet, wiping their oily hands on their wrappers. Who are these people? Emeka screamed, his voice cracking. Who are these people in my house? Adanna stood up. She was afraid, yes, but the palm wine had given her a little courage. She wiped her mouth. They are my sisters, Emeka, she said, a small, genuine smile still lingering on her lips. They came to visit me. Sisters? Emeka looked at Nkechi, who was wearing a faded t-shirt and a wrapper that smelled of raw peppers. He looked at the cooler of abacha. You turned my living room into a market square? You brought the gutter into my house? Emeka, please. Get out. Emeka roared, pointing at the door. All of you. Get out of my house. Now. Oga, take it easy now, Nkechi tried to speak. Don't talk to me. Emeka yelled, his face twisting in disgust. You look dirty. You smell dirty. Look at my floor. Look at the oil. You are uncivilized animals. Get out before I call the police. The word dirty hung in the air like a slap. The women packed their coolers quickly, muttering apologies, their heads bowed in shame. They scurried out the door like rats chasing safety. Nkechi looked back at Adanna with sad eyes, but she couldn't stay. Adanna stood alone in the middle of the room. The silence returned, but this time it was violent. Emeka turned to her. I try to polish you. I try to clean you up. And the moment I turn my back, you roll in the mud again. You are incapable of being better. Adanna looked at the door where her friends, her joy, had just been chased out. She looked at Emeka, the man who called her people dirty. Something inside her snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet sound of a final string breaking. The fear in her face vanished. The sadness vanished. Her face hardened into stone. The light in her eyes, That spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, this marriage could work, flickered and died completely. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just looked at him with dead eyes. "I will clean the floor," she said, her voice hollow. She knelt down and began to wipe the oil with the hem of her wrapper. Emeka watched her, expecting to feel satisfied that he had restored order. Instead, looking at her empty eyes, he felt a sudden chill. He had won the battle for his clean floor, but he had just lost the war for her soul. The morning sun filtered through the high windows of the Lecky mansion, but it brought no warmth to the breakfast table. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and unspoken resentment. Adanna sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on a spot on the marble table. She looked drained, her spirit eroded by the constant friction of trying to be someone she wasn't. Emeka walked in, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, smelling of expensive cologne and arrogance. He carried a briefcase in one hand and a thick hardcover book in the other. He didn't say good morning. He simply slid the book across the glass table. It stopped inches from Adanna's hands. The title read, "The Art of Social Graces, A Guide to Modern Etiquette." The cover featured a picture of a white woman sipping tea with her pinky finger raised. "I am going to work," Emeka announced, adjusting his cufflinks. "On top of that book is a list of chores. I want the curtains changed. I want the rugs vacuumed again, properly this time. And I want you to read the first 3 chapters of that book." Adanna looked at the book, then slowly raised her eyes to meet his. "Emeka," she started, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Don't interrupt me," he snapped, checking his reflection in the window. "I am doing this for your own good, Adanna. You embarrassed me yesterday with those market women. It cannot happen again. When I come back this evening, I want to hear you speak proper English. No more broken. No more pigeon. You will practice your diction. Do you understand?" Adanna looked at him. Really looked at him. For months she had seen a god. Now she saw a small man in a big suit. She saw a man who was so hollow he needed to paint over others to feel colorful. "Do you understand?" he repeated, his voice rising. "Yes, Emeka," she said softly. "Good." He grabbed his car keys. "Don't disappoint me." Again, the front door slammed shut. The automatic lock clicked. The engine of the G-Wagon roared to life and faded into the distance. Adanna sat in the silence for a long time. She looked at the book on etiquette. She opened it. The words blurred before her eyes. Rules about which fork to use for salad. How to sit without crossing your legs. How to smile without showing too much gum. She looked down at her own hands. They were strong hands. Hands that could pound yam. Hands that could weave hair. Hands that had held her dying grandmother. Hands that Emeka called dirty. She looked at the pristine white marble floor. She realized then that no matter how hard she scrubbed, no matter how much bleach she used, she would never be white enough for his walls. She would never be polished enough for his world. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a reflection. Adanna stood up. She didn't pick up the book. She didn't pick up the chore list. She walked upstairs to the guest room. She pulled her old Ghana Must Go bag from the bottom of the wardrobe where she had hidden it. The checkered bag was dusty, but it looked like freedom. She opened the closet filled with the expensive clothes Emeka had bought. The sequin dresses, the tight skirts, the uncomfortable heels. She left them all. She packed only her Ankara wrappers, her worn slippers, and the few Naira notes she had saved from the feeding allowance. She stood in front of the mirror. She reached up and unclipped the expensive bone straight wig Emeka loved so much. She pulled it off, revealing her threaded hair underneath. Her scalp breathed. She took a wet towel and wiped the powder from her face, revealing her dark, glowing skin. She looked at herself. Adanna. There she was. She walked downstairs, the heavy bag dragging slightly. She wrote a note on the back of the chore list Emeka had left. She placed it on top of the etiquette book. She walked out the back door, through the garden, to the pedestrian gate. Musa was there, listening to the radio. He looked at her bag, then at her face. He saw the determination. He didn't ask questions. He simply pressed the button to open the gate. "Go well, madam," he whispered. "Thank you, Musa," she replied. She stepped out onto the paved street of Lekki, the sun hitting her face. It was hot, humid, and loud. It was perfect. 6 hours later, Emeka returned. He was in a good mood. He had closed a deal for a new shopping mall in Ikeja. He felt generous. He decided that if Adanna had done her reading, he might let her watch TV tonight. He entered the house. "Adanna," he called out. "I'm home." Silence. "Adanna." He walked into the living room. The curtains had not been changed. The rugs looked the same. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful silence of order he liked. It was the hollow silence of abandonment. It felt like a tomb. He frowned. Adanna. He went upstairs. The guest room door was open. The closet doors were flung wide. The expensive clothes were there, hanging like colorful corpses. The wig was on the dresser, looking like a dead animal. But Adanna was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He ran back downstairs. He saw it on the dining table. The etiquette book. And on top of it, a piece of paper. He picked it up. His hands shook slightly. The handwriting was jagged, written with a heavy hand. But the intent was clearer than any architectural blueprint he had ever drawn. It read, Emeka, I read small of your book. It say a lady must know when to leave a place where she is not welcome. I try to change. I try to be city woman. But paint cannot change clay pot into glass cup. If you break the pot, you only get broken pieces. I may be village girl, but I am human being. I have blood. I have name. You want robot that will press button and say, yes, sir. Go and buy toy at ShopRite. Do not find me. My bride price is in the drawer. I leave your house for you. You can marry the mirror now. Adanna. Emeka stared at the note. He looked at the empty chair where she usually sat. He looked at the vast, cold, perfect living room. For the first time in his life, the silence didn't feel like power. It felt like a scream. 6 months had passed since the day the Gonna Must Go bag disappeared from the wardrobe. The rainy season had come and gone in Lagos, washing away the dust, but leaving the humidity. Emeka sat alone in the center of his vast living room. It was 9 p.m. on a Friday. The house was exactly the way he had always claimed he wanted it. It was spotless. The marble floors gleamed under the recessed lighting, reflecting the furniture like a still lake. There was no smell of fermented locust beans. There was no smell of village soup. There were no loud, raucous laughs echoing from the gatehouse. The air was cool, scented only by the automatic lavender dispenser that puffed silently every 15 minutes. He held a glass of Blue Label whiskey in his hand, the ice cubes clinking softly, the only sound in the entire 5-bedroom mansion. He had control. He had silence. He had order. And he had never been more miserable in his life. In the first month after Adanna left, Emeka had tried to convince himself it was a victory. Good riddance, he had told Tund over drinks. She was too raw, too unteachable. He tried to pivot back to his past. He had scrolled through his phone one lonely night and dialed Cynthia's number, his thumb hovering over the call button with a mixture of arrogance and desperation. He wanted to offer her a second chance. But before he could call, he checked her Instagram. There was a new photo posted just 3 hours prior. It was Cynthia, laughing with her head thrown back, a diamond ring sparkling on her finger. Beside her was a man, not a big man in a stiff suit, but a man in jeans and a t-shirt, looking at her with pure adoration. The caption read, "He loves my ambition as much as he loves me." #engaged. Emeka had thrown his phone across the sofa. The woman he called a competitor had found a teammate. The sting of that rejection had sent him spiraling back to anger. He decided he wouldn't let Adanna get away with wasting his time. 2 weeks ago, he had driven the G-Wagon back to Umuorji. He told himself he was going to demand a refund of the bride price. He told himself it was about principle. When he arrived at Matsi Okeke's compound, the reception was different. There were no nervous scurrying, no excessive bowing. Matsi Okeke sat on his veranda, eating kola nut with a calm that unsettled Emeka. "Where is she?" Emeka had demanded, not bothering to sit. "I want my money back. Your daughter ran away. She broke the contract." The old man had looked at Emeka, his eyes crinkling not with fear, but with pity. "The money you paid is in the envelope you left on the table in Lagos," Matsi Okeke said slowly. "Adanna did not take a kobo of your bride price. She said she could not sell herself twice." "Then where is she?" Emeka barked. "I want to see her." "She is not here," the father replied, taking a bite of the nut. "She is in Onitsha. She used the small money she saved from the feeding allowance you gave her to enroll in an evening school. She is learning adult education. She wants to be a teacher." Emeka froze. "A teacher? Adanna?" "Yes," Matsi Okeke nodded. "She is happier, my son. Her hands are rough from working during the day, but her eyes are bright. She told me to tell you something if you ever came back." "What?" Emeka asked, his throat dry. She said, "Tell him thank you. He showed me exactly what I do not want. He showed me that a golden cage is still a cage." Emeka had driven back to Lagos in a daze. He had expected her to be suffering, regretting her decision to leave his palace. Instead, she was struggling in a noisy city, paying for her own school, and she was happier than she had been in his air-conditioned mansion. Now, sitting in his living room, Emeka looked at the spot on the floor where Adanna's friends had sat eating abacha. He remembered how disgusted he had felt. Now, he looked at the clean white tile and realized how cold it looked. He realized that he had spent his life trying to be a sculptor. He wanted to chisel people into shapes that pleased him. He tried to chisel Cynthia into a housewife. He tried to chisel Adanna into a sophisticated mannequin. But people are not stone. When you chisel away their essence, their laughter, and their identity, you don't get a masterpiece. You get dust. And eventually, the stone breaks. He took a sip of the whiskey. It tasted bitter. He had won. He was the master of his domain. No one argued with him. No one ate with their hands. No one played loud music. He was the king of his castle. But as he looked around the vast, empty space, the silence pressing against his eardrums, Emeka finally understood the cost of his arrogance. He had built a perfect house, but he had driven away the only two things that could have made it a home: an equal partner who challenged him and a loyal partner who would have loved him. He placed the glass on the table. The sharp clink echoed through the room, sounding like the closing of a prison door. Emeka buried his face in his hands and wept. He was a rich man, a powerful man, a man of high status. But in the grand, silent emptiness of his castle, he was just a lonely man who had played God and lost. And that is the tragic reality of Emeka's empty castle. He succeeded in building the perfect house, with his spotless marble floors and silent rooms, but in the process, he destroyed the only thing that could have made it a home. Emeka learned the hard way that you cannot chisel a human being into a shape that pleases you. When you try to erase someone's identity to suit your ego, you don't get a perfect partner. You get a stranger, or worse, you get nothing at all. He wanted a blank slate, but he forgot that Adanna was already a masterpiece written in a language he refused to learn. Now, I have a very serious question for you guys, and I want to see your answers in the comments. Do you think Emeka deserves a second chance? If he drives to Onitsha, finds Adanna, and begs on his knees, should she forgive him and return to the mansion? Or is a man who treats you like a project someone you should run from forever? Type yes if she should go back, or a no if she should stay free. Let's get the debate started below. If this story touched your heart, please show us some love by hitting the like button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to Folktale Bestie. We are working hard to bring you the best African storytelling on YouTube, and your subscription helps us grow more than you know. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to tell us which country you are rep.ing in the comments section. Until next time, remember, love is about acceptance, not renovation. Bye for now.